Saddam Hussein and his sons must leave Iraq within 48 hours.
In March 2003, the United States launched its invasion of Iraq, a campaign that would topple one of the most feared dictators of the modern age, Saddam Hussein. For decades, he ruled through tyranny, but as his regime collapsed, Saddam vanished, igniting one of the largest manhunts in military history. For 8 months, U.S. intelligence tracked leads, interrogated loyalists, and searched the deserts of Tikrit. Then, in December 2003, Operation Red Dawn, the raid that ended Saddam's reign, finally struck. So how did Saddam Hussein rise to power in the first place? How did he elude capture for so long? And how did American forces finally track him down in one of history's most extraordinary manhunts? Saddam Hussein's journey to power began not in a palace, but in poverty. Born in 1937 in the village of Al-Auja, near Tikrit, he grew up fatherless and under a harsh stepfather. Surrounded by hardship and violence from a young age, Saddam learned early that survival required strength and fear. A reported claim of Saddam's early years is that he carried a gun before he was a teenager. At age 20, he joined the Ba'ath Party, a radical nationalist movement that preached Arab unity, socialism, and anti-Western independence. But Saddam's Ba'athism had a darker core, one driven by control and fear. In 1959, he took part in an assassination attempt against Iraq's leader, General Abd al-Karim Qasim. The plot failed, and Saddam was wounded in the leg while escaping Baghdad. He fled to Syria, then Egypt, and spent years as a fugitive, learning the arts of conspiracy, survival, and violence that would define his rule. When the Ba'ath Party seized power in 1968, Saddam was waiting. He quickly rose through the ranks and eliminated rivals. By 1979, he forced his cousin, President Ahmed Hassan al-Bakr, to resign, and Saddam Hussein became president of Iraq. That same day, he held a chilling meeting broadcast on national television. Saddam read a list of names, supposed traitors within his own party, and ordered them taken out of the room one by one. Many were executed within hours. The message was unmistakable. Loyalty meant life, dissent meant death. Once in power, Saddam built a personality cult rivaling Joseph Stalin's. His portrait hung in schools and shops. State media called him Father of the Nation and the Lion of the Arabs. School children recited poems in his honor. But behind the propaganda was a regime of terror. Saddam's secret police, the Mukhabarat, monitored every neighborhood. Torture chambers operated in the heart of Baghdad. Even family members weren't safe. He ordered his own sons-in-law shot after they defected to Jordan in 1995. In the 1980s, Saddam plunged Iraq into war. First came the Iran-Iraq War, a devastating 8-year conflict that claimed over 1 million lives on both sides. During the fighting, Saddam's forces resorted to chemical warfare, which tragically affected not only Iranian soldiers, but also Kurdish civilians in northern Iraq. The most infamous incident occurred in the town of Halabja, where thousands of innocent people suffered from toxic chemical exposure. Then, in 1990, he invaded Kuwait, triggering the Gulf War and drawing the wrath of a U.S.-led coalition. Within weeks, his army was crushed, but Saddam survived, and he portrayed the war's end as a victory, claiming he had faced the entire world and not been defeated. Economic sanctions followed, crippling Iraq's economy. Yet Saddam clung to power through fear, propaganda, and patronage. While children starved under embargoes, palaces continued to rise along the Tigris River, more than 70 grand estates in all. When the United States invaded Iraq in March 2003, it was officially to eliminate Saddam's weapons of mass destruction, though no stockpiles were ever found. There was little doubt that Washington's true target was Saddam himself. In Baghdad, U.S. bombs obliterated government buildings. Statues of Saddam were torn down. His sons, Uday and Qusay Hussein, were killed in a fierce firefight in Mosul that July. But Saddam Hussein, the man whose face had once filled every street corner and government office, seemed to vanish into thin air. For months, no one knew whether he was dead, hiding abroad, or directing resistance from the shadows. American intelligence put him at the top of the most wanted deck of cards, the Ace of Spades. His regime was gone, but the insurgency was growing. Bombings, ambushes, and attacks on U.S. convoys erupted across Iraq. Many locals whispered that Saddam was still alive, rallying his loyalists to drive the Americans out. Saddam's myth became his greatest weapon. Finding Saddam turned into one of the largest manhunts in modern history, a massive intelligence operation involving the CIA, U.S. Special Operations Command, and the Army's 4th Infantry Division. At first, American forces searched bombed-out palaces, underground bunkers, and tunnels across Baghdad and Tikrit. They found decoys, lookalikes, and hidden caches of gold, but no dictator. CIA analysts realized they were searching the wrong areas. Saddam wasn't hiding in luxury. He was hiding among loyalists. The key was his tribal network around Tikrit, his birthplace and power base. His extended family and tribal allies, the Abu Nasser clan, formed an invisible shield around him. So instead of looking for Saddam directly, the CIA began tracking the people protecting him. Dozens of former Ba'ath Party officials, cousins, and tribal leaders were rounded up. Every night, U.S. interrogators questioned prisoners looking for clues. While U.S. intelligence combed the countryside, Saddam was living like a ghost. He moved between safe houses and rural farms around Tikrit, aided by loyal tribesmen. He disguised himself in robes and grew a thick beard. He lived off dates, rice, and canned food, sometimes hiding in tiny underground bunkers, sleeping by day and moving only at night. He communicated through handwritten notes passed along by couriers. Each message could take days to reach its destination, and by the time it did, Saddam had already moved. Contrary to popular belief, Saddam didn't command a guerrilla army. He was completely cut off. Still, his legend endured. Even in hiding, many Iraqis whispered that the president would one day return. By December 2003, U.S. forces had captured most of Saddam's inner circle. Finally, one man broke: Mohammed Ibrahim, the bodyguard who had been with Saddam since the early days. Under questioning, he revealed Saddam's most recent hideout, a rural farmhouse near the village of Ad-Dawr, about 10 miles south of Tikrit. On the night of December 13, 2003, the mission to find Saddam Hussein was set in motion. The operation's name, Red Dawn, came straight from a 1980s Cold War movie about an American resistance force, and its two target zones were codenamed Wolverine 1 and Wolverine 2. As darkness fell over the farmland near Ad-Dawr, helicopters carrying members of Task Force 121, an elite blend of Delta Force operators, Army Rangers, and CIA officers, moved silently into position. The surrounding area was known for its dense palm groves, mud brick homes, and narrow irrigation canals, ideal terrain for someone trying to disappear. At around 8 p.m., U.S. soldiers sealed off the compound believed to be sheltering Saddam. They began searching two small farmhouses and nearby outbuildings, cautiously, methodically, expecting armed resistance. But instead of a firefight, they found two men who surrendered quietly, Saddam's bodyguards, who had been protecting him for months. Interrogators questioned the men immediately. One finally motioned toward a small, uneven patch of dirt outside. Beneath an old rug and a pile of debris lay a concealed wooden lid, covering what looked like a narrow underground cavity. When soldiers lifted it, they found a crude spider hole, just large enough for a single person. Inside the hole was Saddam Hussein. He was bearded, disheveled, and unarmed. The man who lived in marble palaces now emerged from the ground looking weary and thin. Upon capture, a soldier reportedly said in English, "President Bush sends his regards." Saddam reportedly replied calmly, "I am Saddam Hussein, the president of Iraq, and I am willing to negotiate." There was no negotiation. He was taken into custody without resistance. At the site, soldiers recovered $750,000 in U.S. $100 bills, 2 AK-47 rifles, and a pistol. But no communication devices, no maps, and no sign of a command network. Saddam had not been directing an insurgency. He had been isolated and on the run, moving from farmhouse to farmhouse, relying on his tribal allies for food and shelter. At a nearby base, medical personnel examined Saddam, confirming a distinctive scar on his upper lip and other identifying marks. To remove all doubt, a DNA test was conducted using samples from family members already in U.S. custody. The results were conclusive. It was Saddam Hussein. When word reached Washington, Central Intelligence Agency Director George Tenet personally briefed President George W. Bush. The next day, in Baghdad, U.S. Administrator L. Paul Bremer stood before reporters and announced the news that echoed around the world. "Ladies and gentlemen, we got him." That phrase became the headline around the world the next day. On December 14, 2003, U.S. authorities released video footage of Saddam's medical examination, a symbolic moment meant to prove to Iraqis and the world that the former dictator was truly in custody. The footage was stark. Saddam sitting quietly as a military doctor inspected his hair and mouth under bright lights. The images contrasted sharply with decades of propaganda that had portrayed him as an untouchable, all-powerful leader. For many Iraqis, especially those who had lived in fear of his rule, the sight of Saddam in captivity was a moment of closure and disbelief. Crowds in Baghdad celebrated. Others, still loyal to his party, mourned. But the myth of Saddam's invincibility was gone forever. After his capture, Saddam was transported to a secure U.S. military facility known as Camp Cropper, near Baghdad International Airport. He denied possessing weapons of mass destruction, insisting the United States had invaded on false pretenses. He admitted to ordering harsh actions during his rule, but portrayed himself as Iraq's defender against chaos and extremism. Surprisingly, interrogators noted that Saddam was cooperative, articulate, and deeply proud. He wrote poetry, asked for books, and often steered conversations toward history and politics. In June 2004, sovereignty was officially transferred back to an interim Iraqi government, and Saddam Hussein was handed over for trial. The proceedings began the following year, broadcast live across the nation. He faced charges for crimes against humanity, primarily related to the 1982 Dujail incident, in which dozens of Iraqis were killed following an assassination attempt on Saddam's convoy. Throughout the trial, Saddam remained defiant. He questioned the court's legitimacy, dismissed witnesses, and often clashed with judges. Yet the evidence against him was overwhelming, drawn from years of official documents, testimonies, and archives uncovered after the fall of his regime. In November 2006, Saddam Hussein was found guilty and sentenced. The operation that ended Saddam's reign remains one of the most complex manhunts in modern military history. It involved thousands of interrogations, hundreds of coordinated raids, and meticulous human intelligence. Not satellites or technology, but people, villagers, relatives, and soldiers, who unraveled a network of loyalty that had shielded Saddam for decades. The entire mission cost millions of dollars and required cooperation across every branch of U.S. intelligence. Yet in the end, it was one exhausted bodyguard's confession that led to Saddam's final hiding place. Operation Red Dawn became a case study for future counterinsurgency and intelligence operations. Proof that patience, persistence, and human networks could succeed where technology alone could not.